It looked like just another elegant British saloon rolling out of a small factory in 1953. But underneath that quiet, dignified body sat an engine and a chassis so advanced that racing engineers of the era would have recognized it instantly. Only 270 of these cars were ever built, yet the people who drove them never forgot the experience. This is the story of the Lagonda 3 Litre, and by the time we're done, you'll understand exactly why a car this brilliant vanished from showrooms in just 5 short years. Let's start with something most people never realize when they look at that long, graceful bonnet. The heart of this car wasn't a brand new design at all. It was actually the older 2.6-litre engine, bored out to nearly 3 litres. But here's the surprising part. The engineers didn't just make the cylinders bigger in the usual way. They staggered the bores, shifting them slightly out of line with each other, while keeping the exact same crankshaft from the smaller engine. That meant the connecting rods had to be offset too, angled slightly instead of running straight. It sounds like a strange compromise, but it was actually a clever piece of problem solving. Why redesign an entire engine from scratch when you can coax more power out of what you already have? The result was 140 horsepower, a serious jump from the 2.6 litres 105. For drivers stepping into the 3 litre for the first time, that extra muscle meant effortless overtaking on narrow British B-roads, real touring pace on long drives, and a smoothness that belied its unusual internal geometry. Once you know the engine was essentially a clever reworking rather than a clean sheet design, you look at that long hood with a whole new kind of respect. What most people never realized was that this so-called luxury saloon was hiding a chassis borrowed almost directly from the racetrack. The 3 litre used a cruciform-shaped chassis, all-independent suspension with coil springs at the front and torsion bars at the rear, and rack and pinion steering. Technology that, in the early 1950s, belonged in sports and competition cars, not in dignified family saloons. Most luxury manufacturers of that era were still using stiff, old-fashioned setups designed purely for comfort. Lagonda's engineers, working under the ownership of David Brown, took a different path. They wanted a car that handled like it meant it. Why go to that trouble for a gentleman's touring car? Because W.O. Bentley himself, the same man behind the legendary Bentley Mark, had designed the twin overhead cam engine underneath it, and the whole car was built around the idea that comfort and genuine driving pleasure didn't have to be enemies. For the people who actually owned one, this meant a car that gripped corners with real confidence, one that rewarded a skilled hand on the wheel instead of just floating along. Imagine sitting behind the wheel of what looks like a formal English saloon, only to discover it corners like something built for competition. That contrast is part of what made the 3 litre so quietly special. Here's a fact that surprises even seasoned car enthusiasts. When Lagonda replaced the 2.6 litre in 1953, they didn't start with a practical 4-door saloon everyone expected. They started with the 2-door sport saloon first. The 4-door version didn't arrive until 1954, a full year later. Most manufacturers build the family car first and add a sportier variant afterward, almost as an afterthought. Lagonda did the exact opposite. Why? Because this was meant to be a driver's car above everything else, and the company wanted that sporting character to define the model from day one, before practicality entered the conversation. For early buyers, that meant the very first 3 litres to leave the factory were the more athletic, more visually striking coupes and dropheads, cars built by the renowned coach builder Tickford. There's something wonderfully old-fashioned about a company putting driving joy ahead of everyday usefulness, and it tells you exactly what kind of car this was always meant to be. But here is the surprising part that even flattering reviews couldn't hide. When the respected British publication The Motor tested the 3 litre, they praised it as one of the very few saloon cars whose real appeal was aimed squarely at the skilled and appreciative driver. High praise indeed. Yet in that same test, they noted a pronounced tendency to oversteer, despite the car's otherwise excellent road manners. In plain terms, this meant the back end of the car could step out of line if you pushed it hard through a corner, something that demanded genuine skill rather than casual confidence. This wasn't a flaw hidden in a marketing brochure. It was published, in black and white, by one of the most trusted motoring magazines of the day. For everyday drivers, this meant the 3 litre wasn't a car you simply pointed and drove. It asked something of you. It rewarded attentiveness and punished carelessness. And in a strange way, that honesty is part of why enthusiasts still admire it. This was never a car built to flatter everyone. It was built to be respected. What most owners never fully appreciated at the time was how tightly connected their car's fate was to the small coach-building firm putting the body together. Tickford, the company responsible for crafting the elegant coupe and drophead bodies, wasn't originally part of Aston Martin Lagonda at all. It was an independent coach builder. That changed in 1955, when David Brown personally bought Tickford outright, bringing body construction fully in-house for the first time. Why did this matter? Because up until then, Lagonda's fate depended on an outside supplier for its most visible, most labor-intensive component, the handcrafted body itself. Bringing Tickford into the fold gave Brown tighter control over quality and production, but it also marked a turning point. The old, more independent way of building a Lagonda was ending, folded into a larger, more corporate structure. For anyone who has ever watched a beloved small business get absorbed into something bigger, there's a familiar bittersweetness here. That bittersweetness deepened in 1956, when Aston Martin Lagonda made a decision that quietly closed one chapter of British motoring history. The company shut down its historic Feltham factory entirely and moved all operations to Newport Pagnell, where the Tickford coachworks had always been based. Feltham had been Lagonda's home since David Brown first bought the struggling company back in 1947. Moving away from it wasn't just a logistical decision, it was symbolic. The old Lagonda identity, forged in that specific place, was being absorbed into the broader Aston Martin operation. What most people never realized was that the very same year the Mark II 3-litre appeared, with its updated floor-mounted gear lever, the ground beneath the company itself had already shifted. Once you know this, you can't unsee how much change was happening behind the scenes, even as customers admired the polished car in the showroom. And finally, here's the fact that explains why this remarkable car disappeared so quickly. Despite the engineering brilliance, despite the racing pedigree hidden under that elegant body, the Lagonda 3-litre was simply too expensive for the market it was chasing. It cost more than its direct competitors, and demand never caught up to the price tag. The convertible was the first to go, ending production in 1957 after roughly 55 examples were built. The saloon followed just a year later, in February 1958. When the dust settled, only 270 Lagonda 3-litres had been built across all three body styles combined, a genuinely tiny number for a car this accomplished. It would also be the last car to wear the Lagonda name built with real continuity from the company's own engineering roots. When the Lagonda badge returned in 1961 with a Rapide, it was a different car entirely, styled by an Italian coach builder, aimed at a different era. The 3-litre wasn't killed by any flaw in its engineering. It was killed by simple economics, priced just out of reach of the buyers who might have loved it most. There's something genuinely moving about a car this well engineered, this carefully thought through, quietly slipping away not because it failed to deliver, but because the world around it moved on too fast for it to find its audience. Every one of the 270 Lagonda 3-litres built between 1953 and 1958 carries that story now. A reminder of a small British company that tried to build something honest and brilliant, and very nearly got it right for everyone. Did you ever come across a Lagonda 3-litre, at a car show, in an old family garage, or maybe just in a photograph passed down through the years? Share your memory in the comments below, and if this story brought back a little piece of automotive history you didn't know before, feel free to pass it along to someone who'd appreciate it too.